Hi, class. Mr. Wallington. Welcome to week 3. Man, we are cranking right through this course, isn't it? I tell you, week 3, what we got going on? We're going to pick up kind of where we left off last week with ethics. Some of the ethical challenges with business and the implications associated with some of the privacy laws and how we implement privacy. All right, let's get into this. All right, so when we think about this module, we're just going to do a quick overview. Some of the learning objectives this week, what we're going to look at is really, like I said, how to explain some of the ethical foundations that are applied in this environment, look at some of the privacy laws associated with cyber defense, also going to analyze some of the effects of those laws on an organization and how there's some real world scenarios on the impacts of privacy business laws. Another thing we're going to do, if you just kind of take a look at this module at a glance, some things you want to do is get that's going to be due this week. You got knowledge checks coming up. Like I said, these are ungraded knowledge checks. Be sure you review all the module resources because there's quite a few different readings, not just in the book, but there's also some hyperlinks that'll take you to the library that has some other things for you to read. You're going to, as always, your initial assessment, initial discussion post, get that in early, respond to at least 2 of your peers, and also, every week I'm going to drive the same thing. Make it intriguing, make it informative, and ask questions. Like I say, what I will do, ask questions. Now, what I will do also, guys, just remember, this lecture is also a part of the course. So some of the discussion questions I may ask may come from the week's lecture. So just be aware of that. Also, you guys are going to complete the summation of privacy laws part 2, and you're going to complete project 1, which is analysis of privacy laws and business implications. It's going to be a busy week. Be sure you pace yourself. Get your discussions in early, right? So that way other people have time to respond to them as well as myself. Okay, let's see what else we got. Textbook. Did I miss that? Yeah, I sure did. Our textbook, you're going to cover 4 chapters this week, chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8. So they're easy reads, short chapters, shouldn't take you long, but a lot of things in there is what we're talking about today, and really is what I'm going to kind of lecture from as well. So, last week we left off kind of with this circle, right? I introduced the relationships between ethics, morality, and the law. I say ethics governs your professional interactions, morality, it governs your personal and private interaction, and laws govern societies as a whole. This week we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this part right here, ethics. So when we think about ethics, what is it? What's the definition? You can go multiple places for a definition. I went out to Webster's unabridged dictionary for this one. It's the science of human duty. That's just one way of explaining it. We call it a science, but it's really more about human duty, I think. This is the rule set associated that's drawn from how we should behave as humans. A particular set of principles, rules concerning duty, whether true or false. It's a rule of practice to respect a single class of humans' actions, political, social ethics, medical ethics. So there's a lot of layers associated with ethics. But I like this right here myself. Ethics is more concerned with the process of making a decision than with the decision itself. Did we make the decision on how to do something in the right manner? And that is also impressed upon us by, again, morality, law, many inputs that go into decision making, and that we've done it in an ethical fashion. Multiple approaches to ethics. We're just going to talk about a couple of them here. One approach is what we call the ontological or duty-based. And what this does, like I said, examines the nature of actions and the will of the agent rather than the results. Easier way to say that, the means are more important than the end. Okay? So in society, you see this where hopefully, people will say, instead of me trying to just get to an end result, I'm more concerned about who I hurt along the way or who I help along the way. So the means of how to get there is more important than the ends. Another approach to this is the consequentialist approach to ethics. It's really just the opposite. They aim at some type of goal state, some end state, and how to get to that end state. And in a sense, they're saying the ends are more important than the means. Some of the examples of these is utilitarianism. Now, and when we think about utilitarianism, what we're talking about is that it's seeking to maximize the net expectable utility for all parties affected by a decision, meaning that we want to get to an end where everybody wins. And sometimes how we get to that, we can break glass along the way. So 2 different approaches. I guess I'm more of this guy right here, for me personally, where the means means a lot, not just the end. Just trying to get an end result. To me, it's like taking tests. The answer is less important than understanding the processes and the procedures to get there. Just to get the answer right, that's great, looks good on paper. However, learning the process along the way, long term, to me, is much more important. But just and these are just two examples. There are other approaches. Really the science of ethics. There's a lot involved there. All right, let's switch gears a little bit from ethics, but you got to remember, our ethics undergirds everything else we're going to talk about throughout this week, because how we ethically approach things such as privacy with children, privacy in education, healthcare, businesses, federal government, it still comes down to, are we doing the right thing? So when we think about privacy and children and education, there's a couple things that I want to look at here. One, what challenges are associated with protecting children on the internet? First and foremost is, how do you identify, in a connected internet environment that we live in today, how do you identify who the children are, right? Anyone can get online and pretend to be whoever they want to be. You can't spot a dog on the internet, right? So that is the first thing, is how do you identify, children? And if you think about web producers or your ISPs or any type of content producers, there are some things associated with these that some of the laws, a couple of the laws we're going to talk about later, tries to enforce. So that by using different technologies or different processes, administrative procedures, such things that requiring user input, meaning that you have to input some type of data, your birthday, typically the year you were born, to some way to say, yes, if you were born after this date, you shouldn't go to this website. Or things like explicit lyrics on music, 13 and above, or video games, they have those labels. Also, some type of payment method, because if you have to provide a credit card, for instance, then that is a way of automatically finding what your age is and if it's age appropriate. Also, putting parental controls and consents. Many sites, many places now, before you can set up a cell phone account, right? You have to either verify that you are of a certain age, or you have some parental controls or parental consents placed around that. And in this environment, also defining things like obscenity. What's obscene? That is very difficult to put a defined legal definition on what is obscene. And I think probably as you read the text this week, I think one of the things that you hear people say oftentimes, I can't tell you what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. And that is probably still a kind of the golden rule. I can't give you an exact definition, but I know it when I see it. Just to say that, well, if you're showing too much skin, well, you could be in a anatomy class, where you look at the entire body, or a gender reproductive class. So just trying to put a single line that this is obscene, it becomes difficult. But most of us, we know it when we see it. So that's some of the challenges associated with children. Now, there's a couple of laws acts that have been put in place. One is COPA, which is your Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Now, what this really tries to do is protect children's privacy on the internet. Also protect them from any age inappropriate content or online marketing. Like I said, this is where websites by law are supposed to, if it's explicit things associated with the content, that it should be properly marked. Same thing with video games, different types of music, all of these things, online marketing, so that you know that. So that's what COPA. That's really the forcing function of COPA. Now another one is SIPA, which is your Children's Internet Protection Act. What SIPA does? It requires schools and libraries that receive funding from the government for internet access to filter offensive or sexually explicit online content. Again, another slippery slope, because now you have to figure out how to define what it is. Has been a couple of cases, couple of lawsuits where students have said, well, I was in the school library, I couldn't get to this website so I could do my assignment, and I got a bad grade on my assignment. Why? Because the filters that were in place at that school didn't allow them to go to certain websites where you could get more information on a particular subject. But again, the goal, the intent is that if you're in a school or library, that there is filtering, some types of content filtering for children to protect them on the internet. Now, with respect to education, you have FERPA. FERPA is your Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Now, what FERPA does, it tries to protect the privacy of students and their educational records. It also puts some definitions and limitations in place with respect to personal information, PII, personally identifiable information with this environment. And I experienced this, when with our son who was in college, trying to get access to college records. Even as a guardian or a parent, it's not automatic that you could just go see their records, their grades. So there's things associated with that, just to be aware of that. Yes, some of the things that how do we try to protect children and within school, the educational environment and academia, as well as to protect privacy. Now, when we look at privacy in the healthcare arena, a lot of things goes on there. And you probably heard this term HIPAA in this environment. But what are some of the challenges? I mean, especially with healthcare, because there's a lot of things associated in the healthcare industry. So it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that collects a lot of data. It can collect your consumer, your finance data, your personal health information. A lot of data sets are stored in the medical environment, and most of that is sensitive for many different reasons. One, it contains very intimate details about an individual, and some things that could be very embarrassing, humiliating, could be career ending if your medical information got into the wrong hands. So it's very, very, very sensitive information, and it's again another slippery slope of definition. How do you define who can see what? Even family members, even spouses, doesn't mean that you can automatically see a spouse's medical records. So unless there is consent. Without consent, even a husband or a wife may not be able to see their spouse's medical records. Big reason for that is medical identity theft. This is growing. Where now individuals, why? Because of the cost of insurance, the cost of health care. So now if I can steal your identity, I may be able to get health care for myself under your name and use your insurance benefits and everything else while I'm getting the health coverage. So just really two areas, especially with respect to medical identity theft. So what's been put in place to try to help that is HIPAA, your Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Now, what does that do? It helps you. It was designed, not to say that it's successful, but it was designed to help make health insurance portable, meaning that now your insurance, your information, health information, that data can be moved between healthcare providers, insurance companies, and along the way, it also, while it's portable, but also how do we eliminate and help reduce waste and fraud in this environment? It was also built to simplify how health insurance is administered. Because health, if you think health insurance, it is a very, very complex industry. Now, if you think about it, those first three, those were the big ticket items with HIPAA. Protecting your privacy, security of your PII, your personal identifiable health information. That is also one of the things that it tried to do. But many times we go straight there thinking the HIPAA is there for privacy. Well, that is just one subset. But if you see, there's multiple things that HIPAA brought in, not just associated with privacy. All right, so when we think about privacy in the business environment, in the marketplace, and now we're talking public businesses. If you think about the difference between a private business and a public business, Chick-fil-A as opposed to McDonald's. McDonald's is a publicly traded fast food business. You can go buy McDonald's stock, anybody, because it's just common stock that's traded on the one of the stock exchanges. However, Chick-fil-A, on the other hand, is a private business. There's no shareholders, no board of directors. You can't buy stock in Chick-fil-A. So difference between privately held business, publicly held. Now what we're talking about here is really public businesses, because as a public business now there's due diligence through multiple federal organizations. Now, especially with respect to financial reporting. There's financial reporting that a public business has to do that many times may or may not apply to a private business. Now, with that said, there's been a lot of huge, gargantuan scandals over the last, X amount of years. One of the biggest ones that I remember this very well was Enron. That is probably the flagship of scandals. Enron was, it was the darling company. They were making money, head over foot or hand over fist, ever how you want to say it. I mean, just it's if Enron could do no wrong until they started looking deeper into their books, and actually the company was broke, and it was a huge scandal. The CEO was sent to prison. The CFO, COO, all the way down. So it trickled all the way down. And they had a lot of subsidiaries where they were kind of laundering money and moving accounts, renaming accounts. And they really, I think what made Enron so egregious is that they had, over the years, really encouraged their employees to buy Enron stock for their retirement. So when Enron, when it sank, you had a lot of people whose all their savings, their retirement planning, all of that sank with it. So that's why business, just full disclosure of financial records is so important. Now, on the heels of Enron, that's when Congress passed SOX. SOX is your Sarbanes-Oxley Act. That's what you typically know it as SOX. And what it is really for is it was a public company accounting reform. How can we reform this industry and protect investors? It's really about protecting investors. It's trying to keep financial fraud to a minimum. How does it do that? Well, by disclosure. So now it really brought in increased scrutiny to corporate disclosure statements. If you buy stocks or mutual funds, you're going to get what's called a prospectus. In that prospectus, it's going to be a full disclosure of where all of their money is being invested, how much is invested in what types of industry, and all of those things. So you get to see all those, the different Form Ks and Q and N, and I won't go into that because it makes my head hurt. But that was the whole purpose of Sarbanes-Oxley, or SOX, is really to bring some reform to publicly traded companies. Now, within this environment also, we have different frameworks for compliance and security controls. Now, we're going to talk about security controls a little bit more in a couple slides. But when we think about security controls, there's multiple that are out there. And really, at the end of the day, they are there as bumpers, as safeguards that now in an organization that we can implement security controls to reduce risk. Whether it's COBIT, which is your control objectives for information and related technology. You got your ISO standards, like say 27001, that covers information system security and management and the control set. And the one that I am really a lot more familiar with and worked a lot more with, because I've worked a lot with the federal government, is the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the 853 series of controls for security and privacy controls that we implement across the Department of Defense and the federal government. Now, when we think about talking federal government, great segue, how do we look at privacy and government information? Well, when we think about that, what are some of the challenges that the government faces? Because there's a lot of government information, and some of those things that, especially with respect to commerce, but not just that, with respect to national security, infrastructure, critical infrastructure, we're looking at things like cyber war, where now we have, countries and nation-state actors, we're always going back and forth in this cyber arena. Spies, data theft, big with data theft, Pretty much anybody who's been in the military over the last 10 years, they know that all of our social security numbers, well, a lot of that was compromised in an Office of Management and Budget, OMB, action that happened a few years ago. So data theft is big. Like I say, we've had data that's been extracted, exfiltrated from the Pentagon, from the DOD, from other federal agencies that have gone to nefarious actors in this environment. Also, when we look at the government, we have to look at some of the major laws that have been put in place. One is FISMA. This is huge, your Federal Information Systems Management Act. FISMA was probably one of the most foundational or fundamental changes to managing information systems in the federal government space. And when we think about FISMA, it did a couple things, but two that was really, I think, fundamental. One, it authorizes NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to develop information system standards and apply those standards across all of our government agencies. I know years back, when we had other types of standards, the Department of Defense had their standard, FBI had their standards, the Department of Education, that everyone had their own, every federal agency had their own IT information system standard. So, and then when you try to cross pollinate across these government agencies made it very difficult because the standards were all different. FSMA brought in some standardization. Now, like I said, these standards applied for all federal systems except national security systems, NSS, national security systems. And what the FSMA did, though, they authorized NSA, the National Security Agency, to now bring some standardization into national security systems. And what the NSA do? Well, they took some of the same policies and standards that NIST developed, like 853, and they developed their own set of guidelines based on NIST 853. A lot of the Committee on National Security Systems, like 1253, is a CNSSI information system standard that it dovetails right into 853 controls. And we'll talk about those here, I think, next slide. So it required federal agencies to create an agency-wide information security program. One of the things that you may hear in this environment, especially working in the federal government arena or the Department of Defense, is RMF, Risk Management Framework. That is a framework that is used across the federal government, and it's a standard that no matter where you move within that space, you will always recognize the risk management framework. Now, a couple other laws that have been put in place to when we think about privacy. Like I say, it was the Privacy Act of 1974. Now, what that does, it really brought rules of how agencies or interagencies have to follow to be able to collect, use, and transfer personally identifiable information. The Privacy Act of 1974. And there have been multiple amendments to this Privacy Act. And the second was the eGov Act of 2002. Now, what that did, that brought in what we call your privacy impact assessments. Now, within these governmental organizations, you have to do some type of assessment, whether you're using technical controls, administrative controls, physical controls, on how privacy information is maintained, how it's transferred, how it's used, how it's collected, how it's stored, and across all those environments. So when we think about security controls, like I said, I'm going to get a little bit deeper in security controls because, guys, I tell you, this is the heart of what we do within cybersecurity, okay? It comes down to controls. And when we think about a security control, think about it from this perspective. A security control is anything that we put in place to mitigate risk. You have security controls in your own home. Now, it's not NIST 853 probably, or COVID, or ISO 27001 or 2. However, you have controls in place. Why? You probably have a garage. Why do you have that garage? Because you want to minimize or reduce the risk of some type of danger happening to your vehicle. That is, if you have enough room in your garage to get your vehicle in there. So, but still, when you implement a security control, that is the intent. So that if there's a hailstorm coming, or if you're living in a high theft area, I can put my car in the garage. So I have implemented a security control to mitigate or reduce the risk associated with something happening. Same thing here. Now, when we think about these controls, this is what we do. We are implementing security controls. The cybersecurity in our environment, we are implementing controls. We're working with our IT counterparts in our organizations to implement technical controls. We may work with our physical security counterparts to implement physical security controls. There are many people that we work with in our organizations to implement administrative controls based on policies, okay? So when we think about our NIST standards, this is just a snapshot of 853. These are the control families, right? So access control, awareness and training. We've got controls associated with auditing, accountability, security assessments, and you see that list goes all the way down. Over probably 900 controls that associated with NIST 853. They just came out with a new revision, revision 5, and in Rev 5 they added a couple things. One is the PT family. Okay, that PT family right here, that is personal identifiable information processing and transparency. So when we think about that, now we're just going to take a walk through a control, and what does that look like? So within this PT family, there's 8 total controls, right? But then we have 13 sub-controls within that, or enhancements to that control. So let's just take one of those and see what it looks like. So let's take PT6. That's the control ID, and the title is System of Records Notice. That's the control, let's say from a privacy perspective, that we're going to put into place. So what does that control actually mean? This is what the, when we look at, excuse me, the actual NIST verbiage of what that control is. For systems that process information that will be maintained in a Privacy Act system of records, These are the things that you have to do. 1, A, draft system of record notices in accordance with OMB guidance and submit new and significantly modified systems of record notices to OMB. B, publish system of record notices in the Federal Registry. Or C, keep systems of record notices accurate, up to date, and scoped in accordance with policy. Those are the 3 things that have to be implemented to meet this control. Now, from a security perspective, this is something that your privacy officer or your organization would probably have to implement. However, as a cybersecurity manager, it is up to me to ensure that this control is implemented on my information system. Now, what we also have is what we call supplemental guidance. NIST supplemental guidance for this control. And what supplemental guidance is that it takes this and it expands it out a little bit more. Trying to give you a free word picture of what that this control is actually trying to implement. So, and this is just a snippet of the supplemental guidance. It says, what it says is the Privacy Act requires that federal agencies publish a system of record notice in the Federal Register upon the establishment or modification of a Privacy Act system of record. So, and like I say, if you go to actually to the NIST, there's several other paragraphs underneath that help explain what that does. Also, like I say, what you have with controls are enhancements, all right? And what enhancements are, like say PT 6.1, that's an enhancement if you're having to do routine uses. PT 6.2 is exemption rules. So now this is what an entire control looks like, and now you can start to see how would I, and asking the question, how do I implement this control in my environment? The whole purpose of the risk management framework was just that. It's not to alleviate risk or not to become so compliance oriented, but to be able to manage risk. Some of the earlier standards, DICAP, DITSCAP, some of these others that we used to use, they were very compliance driven, checkbox driven. And what happens when you get in that environment, sometimes you become more concerned about the system of record than actually meeting the intent of privacy. And the controls are there for that reason. So when we think about that, like I say, yeah, probably over 900 controls. Do you implement all 900? No. When you go through your risk management framework, it helps you to categorize your system, and from that categorization, then you know what subset of this 900 that you need to implement based on your environment. So anyway, so that's, I just wanted to go a little deeper in controls. Guys, this is very, you know what, I wish that most colleges, universities had a class on just security controls, because a lot of you guys are going to leave college, you're going to leave this university, get your first job, you're going to get out there, and you're going to think you're going to jump right in the middle of doing all this high-tech, techie stuff. You probably won't. You're probably going to be doing a mixture of that along with other things to implement your control set. If you're working in the financial industry, PCI DSS, that's the control sets that you're going to be using based on because those are based to look at system that information systems that process credit cards and things like that. So there are control sets, and the thing is, they're going to all look very similar. No matter which family. If I go to COBET, if I go to ISO 27 1 or 2, you're going to see the same types of families. Some way to be able to mitigate risk in access control, training, how to mitigate risk in configuration management, how to implement maintenance controls. So you're going to see a very similar set. Now, they may look a little different, but at the core, they're going to be very, very similar. All right, so let's wrap this up for today. So we look at what we talked about today. We kind of did another review of ethics, morality, and law. We talked about privacy for children and education. We looked at privacy in our healthcare systems, business information systems, government systems, and we talked about security control. So there we have it, guys. So as we look at week 3, there's a lot of things that as you start to see more and more, they interleave together from week 1 to week 2 to week 3. This week, we're looking at challenges with ethics and how to apply these privacy laws, rules in a business environment. Hope you guys have a great week. If you have questions, always reach out. Like I say, I'm just a text away, or you could just leave a message, and I'll get back with you. Have a great week 3.